Thank you for tuning into the JMKing podcast with Jonathan M. King. That's me. You can listen on all major podcast platforms, including but not limited to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Podbean app, Google Podcasts, Pandora, Amazon Music, and Amazon Echo. Visit my website, jmkingpodcast.podbean.com. The link to my RSS feed is there as well. Last but not least, subscribe to the YouTube channel, JMKing Vids Pods, and follow me on Twitter at JMKing Vids Pods. All links can be found in the description. And now, on with the episode. Home stretch, JMKing podcast. Here with my friend Matthew Francisco, aka Movie Matt.
Everything that has a beginning has an end.
Top 5 favorite movies of all time. 5 for me, District 9. 5 for Matthew, Lion King. 4 for me, Clerks. 4 for Matthew, Schindler's List. 3 for me, Count of Monte Cristo. 3 for Matthew, Return of the King, Lord of the Rings. 2 for me, The Dark Knight. 2 for Matthew, Forrest Gump. My favorite movie of all time that I've ever seen. 1984. Drum roll. 1984, starring Eddie Murphy, Beverly Hills Cop. I believe the highest grossing movie of the year. Just beat Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters was second, but I wasn't there in the theaters watching it. I don't even have a story about how I came to love this movie so much. I didn't see it in theaters. I wasn't old. I wasn't born yet. I wasn't allowed to watch as a kid. I don't know, Matthew. It just kind of like, I don't know. It just kind of showed up in my life.
It found you.
It found me. The movie chose me. I've got like personal things with like the way that Eddie Murphy's character Axel Foley. If you watch this movie, it's definitely like gives you insight into my modus operandi, if you will. The way that I figure things out, the way that I navigate things, the way I conceptualize things. In a lot of ways, the way that I'm perceived by people at times. He's a Detroit police detective, brilliant, but he's unassuming. When you first meet him in a scene where he's undercover and he's kind of like, come on, man, like sell me the cigarettes, cigarettes. So you're not expecting him to be a cop. He's undercover. I think that's the point. But throughout the whole movie, people are just kind of like, I don't want to say doubting his abilities, but not expecting him to be as effective at his job as he is. And most of my life, people have encouraged me and recognized my potential and the greatness within me that I need to self-actualize. And I've done well for myself so far. And I'm only getting better and greater, as we all should aspire to be. But I always like the idea of kind of being this secret weapon that you don't really know how powerful I really can be and how strong I can really be. And Axel Foley is that dude. It's like he seems kind of he's funny. I'm funny. He's intelligent. I'm intelligent. I like to think I am. And there's a resolve to me that I have, kind of like Axel Foley. And I think that part of why I identify with Axel Foley so much is because he finds a way to be so effective in what he does in ways that many would find to be, what's the word I'm looking for, Matthew? Unorthodox.
Right. He's ahead of the curve.
He's like the head of the curve in a lot of ways.
He's kind of the thing with the Foley character is he's always 2 steps ahead of everybody. That when you have a, usually in protagonists, often the protagonist starts off as nothing and then becomes something. But Axel actually is one-upping everyone in the entire film
the whole time. And you never realize how far ahead he's thinking until until it's time.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it's perfect how you just said it. I never thought of it that way.
Mm.
Most of these movies, and we'll talk about your number one, about
Yeah.
how we talk about a character who
Start
has
from nothing.
the journey is for them to recognize the greatness within themselves.
Yeah.
But the journey in Beverly Hills Cop is about everybody else recognizing the greatness in the protagonist.
Right.
Because he knows I'm an outstanding detective. I know how to get things done. I know how to figure things out. We know how to get around search warrants in Detroit. He knows what he's doing. But everybody else, because they're looking at him and they're like, "Oh, this guy's a clown. He don't know anything. He's a Detroit. You're in Beverly Hills. We don't get around search warrants in Beverly Hills." But they realize at the end of the movie, they're like, "Oh, snap!"
Yeah.
And I love that there's that iconic shot of him when he does the. I'm not sure exactly what this signal is called when you. It's not a thumbs up, but you like take your pointer finger and your thumb and you kind of like make a circle out of it, and then you leave the rest of your fingers to kind of like curve a little bit like that okay, like that A-OK signal.
Yeah.
He does that after busting up a robbery in a strip club, and he went to the strip club just to kick it with these two police officers, but he notices these guys are casing the joint and that they're about to do a robbery. And this is what the guy said in the movie. He said, before we even really knew what was going on, Foley had already disarmed one of them. So that's at that point they realized, oh, this is a real guy we're working with. He's silly and he's kind of funny, and does things his own way, but he really be getting it done. And I wasn't expecting that. Axel Foley, he does get beat up and jumped and stuff in the movie because but the guy can fight. He can shoot a gun. He can figure things out. He knows his detective work. He knows how to investigate. He knows how to get information. He pretends to be people. He knows how to make a scene. He knows how to get into a super high scale club where only the richest of the rich go. He just gets things done. And his resolve is just based on the fact that his friend was murdered and he wants justice. And he's like not allowed to investigate it, which kind of creates the drama for the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've seen a lot of, when I think Eddie Murphy, I think Beverly Hills Cop. I think 80s Eddie Murphy. I think Beverly Hills Cop. I think 48 Hours. Now I do, recently seeing it. I see Trading Places and I see Coming to America. Those are like my Eddie Murphys. When you think Eddie Murphy,
no Boomerang.
What's it for you? Not Boomerang. Not for me. No. What's it for you when you're like Eddie Murphy? This is it.
Well, okay, I want to talk about another thing because I was going to save Eddie for later, but we're talking about Eddie now. The thing that, okay, to answer your question, Strafbat, okay, look, I was more of a 90s kid, so when I think Eddie Murphy, I think, Nutty Professor or Dr. Doolittle.
Oh, yeah.
So you can imagine me, because, here's Jonathan, he comes in, this is like my number one film, Beverly Hills Cop. I've never seen it, so of course, naturally, I want to see what all the hype is about. The thing that struck me the most about that film is it's like, gosh darn it, his career could have gone the other way. It's like, what happened, Eddie? It's like you resorted to like fart jokes and fat suits, but
yeah,
you literally could have been like the next Will Smith.
In the 80s, Eddie was huge because the thing about Will Smith is like Will Smith he owned July 4th for like years and years. He had Independence Day,
it could have been
which
Eddie
we
Murphy.
know he's not actually the main character in Independence Day. They just retroactively put his face all over all of the material and posters and DVD cases and Blu-ray cases and things because he became so famous.
Yeah.
But at the time, Men in Black, he had that. Eddie, I can't speak to this. I wasn't around. I wasn't alive in the 80s. I'm 1990, but
yeah. People
say that Eddie in the 80s was bigger than what Will Smith was in the 90s because you had the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air hit show. Then you had the movies, but Eddie Murphy was on Saturday Night Live, which is like a big deal. And he was doing stand-up and he was doing movies. So
and Eddie he was he did some music too, right?
He did music. My girl likes to party all the time. Eddie, but like you said, his career could have been different. And I think, what I heard, I didn't do a lot of research on like, quote, what happened to Eddie Murphy. What I learned is that he wanted to make movies that his kids can also watch him in.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you call Nutty Professor kid friendly, but okay.
Nutty Professor's kid friendly.
Come on, like
It's got moments where the adults can be like, "Oh," but kids don't pick up on that stuff. It's kind of like
I
Shrek.
mean, the second film you call kid friendly. I mean,
I
come
mean,
on.
it's
It's very raw. It's
it's
borderline
raunchy, but
raunchy.
it's not like
It's not something
you
you
can
would.
still take your kids and be like, "Oh,"
Okay,
but
but it's
not
not
like
something
Beverly
that
Hills Cop.
it's not something that you would play on like Nickelodeon or something.
Well,
Like Doc,
no.
well, Doctor Doolittle. That's like kid friendly. Shrek is kid friendly, but my
Yeah,
professor. No,
Mulan.
Norbit is not. Norbit is not kid friendly.
Norbit just isn't friendly to anyone, but I
Exactly.
don't, but yeah, so I also think, but of course we could talk about the movie snob stuff. We
Yeah.
can look at the fun facts of how Eddie Murphy, this script was originally written for like a Mickey Rourke, Sylvester Stallone kind of cop who was supposed to be like hard nosed, you feeling lucky, Dirty Harry kind of character.
Wow.
And when they were re they were redrafting or editing the script and they brought Eddie in, it wasn't finished. So it was kind of like this Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man, John Favreau thing, where a lot of those lines he kind of ad libbed, and the script he just filled in the blanks with his own personality and character. So when they people say like this really is Eddie's movie, it really is
It's
Eddie's movie because
it's a tour de it's a tour de
it is a
force.
tour de force. We won't talk about
Right.
2 and 3. 3 I can't finish; it's so bad, and
Yeah.
two is it's not as good.
I just want to note that third film has a cameo by George Lucas. Just
It
give you
does.
a teaser.
George Lucas.
Yeah, just give you a teaser for next choice. But go ahead.
There's no way you can mention George Lucas and it be a teaser. Everybody's gonna know
Nah,
what
I
your
know.
number one is
Whatever.
now.
Whatever.
But yes, the Beverly Hills Cop film has everything that I like in a movie. It's got action, it's got humor, it's got good plot, investigation, performances. It's got everything that I want in a movie, and it's not overly long. Like I mean, I do have Dark Knight on my list, which is 2 hours and some change. But I like that Beverly Hills Cop is just brevity. It just gets it. Scenes just move. Every scene matters. It doesn't keep you longer than it has to. It gets right to the point of every scene, every sequence. It
It
just does
gets the
it.
job
It
done.
just gets the job done, just like Axel Foley does.
Yep.
He just gets things done. There's all kinds of lines, iconic lines. I'm not falling for a banana in my tailpipe, and just a whole bunch. Foley, is that you? This is not my locker. Like there's a whole. It's hilarious.
I
But
do I do
go ahead.
ask you, not to interrupt you, but maybe it's my last thought. It's more of a question, really, because I know you're the guru when it comes to Beverly Hills Cop.
More or
Would you
less.
say that Axel Foley is in a way kind of like a Forrest Gump type character where he really doesn't
Hmm.
go through a change? It's like you because you mentioned it's the people around him that changes. Like they see, oh, he's not just a clown, he's the real deal. So would you say it's almost comparable in that sense?
No one really goes through an arc in Beverly Hills Cop. And I know this is your underhanded way of trying to get me to like Forrest Gump more
No,
by
no,
comparing
no,
it to
no.
something I love. You are. You do
He's
that.
lying.
You
God,
do that.
ladies and gentlemen, he is lying. He
You
is
try
lying.
to do that a lot. You try to, well, this is you kind of like Tenet. You kind of like RoboCop. I mean, you kind of like Terminator. Terminator's kind of like,
Okay.
kind of like Back to the Future too. It's kind of, it's kind of
Mhm.
similar. But no one really goes through an arc. But I think yeah, it's more similar to Forrest Gump in the sense of Axel Foley is who he is from the beginning to the end. Same person. Doesn't really learn anything new except like how to function in Beverly Hills. It's not an arc. But people around him really they come around to his style of policing. Not that they're going to do it as well, but we can more so see in the second film that when they investigate things together, they trust him to lead the way a lot more than they do in the first film of Beverly Hills Cop. Highly recommend it. Highest recommendation, favorite movie of all time. And if you watch it, if you watch it and you know me, you'll kind of see like, oh, I kind of see why John's like this. I kind of see why King is kind of like acts the way he does and thinks the way he does and operates the way he does.
The
So that
king of
this
movies.
is the way.
Yeah. It's the king of movies. Like it's your king, and you king. It's the king for
Yeah,
you.
that sits on my throne at the top.
It sits on the throne. It's on
That's
top of
my
your
number.
DVD. On top of your DVD shelf, it's at the throne.
I don't have one like yours. I have a cabinet underneath my game consoles.
Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Metaphorically, but yes, that's my number one.
Okay. Okay. So everyone take a deep breath, ladies and gentlemen. So we're gonna. Well, you know what? I probably should have not made that George Lucas joke because I kind of gave myself away, but I just couldn't help it because like I'm just so excited to talk about this, and
Part of you.
it's just part of me. It's part of my it's just part of my DNA. So, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm sure like the way I present it is going to cause some controversy, but let me make the case. So my number one choice of all time is not one movie, but three. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the original Star Wars trilogy. And you know, it's kind of like you kind of miss the days when it wasn't just you didn't have to say original Star Wars trilogy. It was just Star Wars trilogy. I'm talking about Star Wars 1977, Empire Strikes Back 1980, and Return of the Jedi 1983. So again, to give you context, I was probably about 5 at the time. You know, it's funny. The Holy Trinity for me as a kid was like Disney, Indiana Jones. Then the third element of that trilogy was this VHS box set that had a guy in a dark mask, and it said Star Wars trilogy. I literally thought that was the title. I was 5. I didn't even know what trilogy meant. I thought
I learned what a trilogy was from Star Wars.
I learned what a
That's what taught me
trilogy
what the word
was
meant.
through Star Wars. See, and every time you hear the word trilogy, you think Star Wars. See, that's how prevalent it is. And I literally thought it was just one movie stretched across 3 VHS tapes because you know, my parents had a copy of Jesus of Nazareth lying around the house, and that was a 6-hour movie stretched across 3 VHS tapes. So I thought, oh, it's kind of like Jesus.
I like this podcast. It's like a 3-hour.
Exactly.
We haven't seen the final runtime yet at the time of this recording, but
I thought it was literally one movie. But man, you know, when I saw that film, it was like an awakening. You know, there has been an awakening.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
I knew you were going to say it.
Which we will talk about later.
I know you're
But
going to say that.
just I feel like I don't even have to explain what Star Wars is. Just because it's been talked about, dissected, been talked about in pop culture so much. So I'm gonna take a cue from I'll plug him because I really like him a lot, Oliver Harper. So the only insight I can give about Star Wars is my personal experience. So, you know, you watch the original 3, and almost akin to Jonathan, how he sees himself as Axel Foley, I see myself in Luke Skywalker. Okay, because you have to understand, you know, and I feel like people pick on Luke, like, so, oh, you know, he's a nerd, you know, he's not as cool as Han Solo, he's whiny. But to be honest, like, especially, and I'm talking more about the Luke in Star Wars, you know, frankly, I was kind of like that growing up, you know, especially in grade school. You know, I was the kid that really didn't fit in. I wasn't really into the types of music people were in. I really didn't understand a lot. Like I was just completely clueless about the goings on in my environment, and just being thrusted into a situation where you have to get your bearings on and whatnot. And then yet he still triumphs. And then you get to Empire, you know, he's getting a little older, he's a little angst ridden, he's caught in between where he wants to be in life. You know, do I, you know, I want to be a Jedi, I'm getting impatient, and you know, frankly, you know, the teenage hormones, you really don't know where you fit in, you feel really angry about yourself. And then by the time you get to Jedi, he gets a much clearer picture of who he is and what his family is, and he kind of grows up in Jedi, you know. And by the time I got to college, I kind of had to solidify myself as an adult. You know, I kind of had to, put that whiny kid aside and actually become adult and make decisions on my own.
You had to
And
unlearn what you have learned.
you have to unlearn what you've learned. And you even look at the color palette of Luke's costume throughout the 3 films. He wears like a white outfit in the first film representing innocence. He wears a gray outfit in Empire Strikes Back representing the sort of in between, like between the light and the dark. And then he goes all black in Jedi. For me, it kind of represents his final temptation into the dark side, because obviously he's this close to going that final step by almost trying to kill his father.
He gets pretty close.
He gets pretty close, and also the blackness kind of represents it's a solidifier. Like this is who I am. I'm not just white or gray anymore. I'm this absolute grown up character. And man, it's just that line when he literally looks straight into the eyes of the Emperor and he says, like, you failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi like my father before me. It's like, here's the amazing thing about that line right there. And I'm just rambling on because there's just so much to talk about. I'm just going what I'm thinking in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
He says to the Emperor, I am a Jedi like my father before me. Because throughout this entire trilogy, he is trying to be a Jedi. He, does all these things, all this training and all this studying. But kind of like in real life, it's almost when you want to be something, you have to proclaim it. It's not something that someone gives you. Like, sure, we get like degrees, we get all these titles and whatnot, but it's when you truly accept who you are, you become that. It's not anybody that someone gives you. It's something that you have to give yourself. So in that moment, when he says, I am a Jedi, he becomes a Jedi. And notice that the Emperor, because throughout the entire film, I'm talking about Return of the Jedi,
mm-hmm.
He uses all these phrases like young Skywalker or my apprentice. But after Luke says that line, he actually says, so be it, Jedi. So even the Emperor
recognizes the turn.
That that this is a full-blown Jedi that I'm dealing with it right now. I'm not dealing with a student. I'm not dealing with a puppet who I'm going
young Skywalker.
Exactly. This is a real Jedi right here, and this is the most evil man in the entire galaxy, the most powerful man in the entire galaxy, and he even recognizes that he is a Jedi. And what more can I say about the film? It's like the John Williams music, which could be an episode in and of itself. Han Solo or Harrison Ford as Han Solo.
You called him Han Solo. That's how iconic he is.
Like Harrison Ford is like, oh, he's Han Solo. Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia. Kind of what I love about Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia is, prior to like Linda Hamilton from like T2,
mm-hmm.
It's like, we think of like, oh, like women have to be tough, like very manly, very strong. But Princess Leia, you do not mess with Princess Leia, but yet she also doesn't lose her femininity. She's still pretty much a woman. She has that woman's touch, but she is just as strong and powerful as any guy, in that entire galaxy right there. It's the art design by Ralph McQuarrie, the sound design by Ben Burt. And as I've told Jonathan, I've told so many people, when you talk about fantasy films, action films, video games, comics, Star Wars is going to come up in the conversation, whether you like it or not. It's going to be brought up at some point. The inevitable, oh, he's the Luke Skywalker archetype. Oh, he's using
the Han Solo type.
He's it's like this movie is so iconic. It almost gave bread to archetypes. Like for example, IGN did a history of awesome. Going through the years of important pop culture stuff. Their first episode was in 1977, and the first thing they talked about was Star Wars. So essentially, what they're saying is awesomeness started with Star Wars. This whole geek culture started with Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't even be here today because of Star Wars. And again, from a personal point of view, I would not be the person who I am today because of Star Wars. So for all these reasons and many more, those films are my favorite films.
I think like a lot of people, creators and things, even like you said, this must be the Luke Skywalker kind of character.
Mm-hmm.
What makes Star Wars amazing is that Star Wars is far from the first story to be told like this, and what the genius of it is that we take all of these archetypes and we put them together in a story that's digestible, which seems to be one of our theme words in this episode.
Digestible.
We put it in a way that it usually when you copy and paste different elements, it doesn't have its own iconography, it doesn't find its own identity. But for Star Wars to basically take this, we take all the archetypes, take the farm boy, the kid who's got great potential but needs to learn and accept, he needs to go on a hero's journey. You got that character. You got the princess, the damsel in distress. You have the pirate rogue, dashing rogue character Han Solo. You have the wise old mentor / wizard character Obi-Wan Kenobi. We have all
the comic relief with the sidekicks.
Comic relief, C-3PO and R2D2. You already have these archetypes that exist in storytelling, but Star Wars still finds a way to be its own iconic thing, even though it's kind of, when you watch the documentaries about Star Wars, a lot of it is just repurposed ideas from other serials and other stories and rehashes, but it still finds its own way to be. I almost said Han Leia. That's the Han Solo character. That's the Leia character. That's like the Darth Vader character. Oh, what is this generation's Star Wars? It's Star Wars has become the Force. It binds us.
It's literally Star Wars is part of the lexicon. It's part of our civilization, our culture.
It has become the Force itself.
Right. It's literally like when people are born into this world, they already know what Star Wars is.
They don't have a chance. They know, no, I'm your father. They know that.
They know that. Yeah.
They know these things. And if we could just go like quickly, like with each film, because there's 3 of them, right?
Okay. Yeah.
You obviously all 3 are your favorite, but why? Which one of those? Like, talk about the thing in each film that's like, okay, this part in Star Wars, this is really what about this movie speaks to me? Okay. What about Empire speaks to me? And what about Jedi speaks to me?
Okay. So for Star Wars, and for the purposes of your host right here, I'm not calling it A New Hope.
Nah, it's called
he refused to call it A New Hope.
Star Wars.
Okay, Star Wars 1977. Okay, Star Wars. Oh gosh. What's up there? I don't know. I can't just pick one.
If the answer is everything, then the answer is everything.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Look. The honest trailers said it best. It's like literally every item, person, vehicle, location, even like people who made the movie. It has no less than a 100 Wikipedia page. Okay,
or Wikipedia.
Or Wikipedia. Name a film that has every single inch of that film that has a Wikipedia page or has an article. They even have an article about
Lord of the Rings or any of the Marvel movies because they're based on books.
There are even discussions about Bolvan. Remember Bolvan?
Of course, I remember Bolvan.
Exactly, because
there's no life forms. Hold your fire.
Exactly. There are even video essays about Bolvan, and he's a one-line insignificant character though. So
not my guy. The guy in Jedi where they throw the freeze and then they throw the thing at him and he falls down into the abyss.
I just thought of if there's one film. I'm sorry, one scene I do rewatch again in Star Wars. It has to be the throne room. I mean, for me, the oxygen. I read this in a novel once. The oxygen of Star Wars is the music. Like, I kind of see John Williams as he's like the narrator of these films, because it's been talked about saying that Star Wars is more like it's more fairy tale than science fiction.
Yes.
which it's common Star Wars is not science fiction, ladies
No.
and gentlemen. It's a fantasy film set in outer space. But we could talk about more of that later. But it's really like almost like a fairy tale story. And the brilliance of John Williams is that he tells the story through the music.
Mm-hmm.
Like
you know what to feel, you know what's happening, you know the emotion,
what to feel, you get
know the plight of
content,
characters.
you know the plight of the character. So he's kind of like, I always see John Williams as like this kind of really kind elderly grandpa who's like reading you this story as you're, how like grandpas, like they over exaggerate certain lines, like the dragon is about to come out.
The dragon, like yeah,
and he does that.
Princess emerges,
and he does that with the music through the highs and through the lows. But to me, the score really crescendos in the throne room. It just the joy and elation of that scene, that the fact that
it's everything.
It's like it's Han, Luke, and Leia. They're so happy to be with each other. They're celebrating their victory, and Luke gets after being made fun of being a farm boy and not knowing anything, he gets vindicated by getting a medal, and it's just, and the audience is clap. I have to clap every time I see that scene. Like the audience is claps, and that final shot of the film, like having all the main characters, kind of like, it's almost like a curtain. It's sort of like a theatrical curtain call in some ways, though. It's just it just fills you with such joy and elation, though. So that's Star Wars. Empire. Man, I'm right now I'm gonna be very boring and say I'm your father. I'm your father. Like it's the father of all plot twists. Like
there you go. Nice.
Right, not the mother of all plot twists. It's the father of all plot twists. I mean, like, sure, you could watch the prequels before, whatever, but I'm talking about the historical context of it. Listen, you and I, Mr. King, had the great fortune of seeing Empire in theaters about a week ago, or no, last weekend.
Like last week.
Yeah. And like that movie is like 40 years old. We've seen that film ad nauseum. We talked about it ad nauseum to the point where it's almost asinine, right? We've just talked about this film today. When that scene showed up in the theater and we had a pretty good crowd.
Great crowd.
The audience was just so enthralled and enraptured. Like that, like when he says, "I am your father," that got like it literally brought the house down.
Still,
and these are people who probably seen the film just as much as we did, and it still gets an applause. Like so, yeah, it's a boring thing to say. "I am your father" is my favorite scene in Empire, but it's a favorite. It's a favorite for a reason. So, and in Jedi, I think I already touched upon it, but it's literally that moment when Luke says, "I am your father," which completes the entire arc of the trilogy. It's actually my favorite line in the entire series. Like when he says, "I am a Jedi, like my father before me." I mean, it doesn't get more epic than that.
It doesn't bother you that he says, "Like my father before me," instead of saying, "Like my father before." I am, which is what grammatically correct.
No, the beauty of that line is he says, "I'm a Jedi like my father before me." So, because literally Vader is just like lying there, right?
Yeah,
he's like half destroyed and defeated. But Luke, in a way, is honoring the good man that he once was.
Yes.
Like he not only is he honoring, he said, I don't care what you did, Emperor. I don't care if you corrupted him and did all these terrible things. My real father is a Jedi, and I'm going to honor him in this moment. And by honoring him, he also becomes a man of his own. It's almost like to kind of bring it full circle of life. Like it's almost like Lion King.
Bring it back to the Lion King.
Bring it back to the Lion King, where like Simba has to follow in his father's footsteps, and when he takes ownership of what has happened, not only does he doesn't really become like his father, he kind of takes his father's place and becomes his own man.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of a biblical thing.
Yeah.
But fathers, what keeps their legacy going is their son.
Exactly.
And
that's
if you raise a good son that like that goes further than you did, like that's your glory as a father.
In
a
like
way, what your son goes and does. If you have sons, like your children overall, but what old school again, like biblical times, it's like back then it was like your son carried the lineage, your son carried the legacy. So if your son accomplishes what you did and more, you can kind of rest easy. And I think Vader, part of what turned him, we know what already turned him, because I think when he's lying there almost dead and he hears that line, never thought about this. When he hears his son say that,
he stands up.
He's like, yeah, go son. Like, oh, he's still tell your sister you were right about me, kind of thing. I think that kind of gives Vader a life to get up, because what happens is he says that line and then the Emperor tortures him and then Darth Vader saves him. That's what it's in that order, right?
Yeah.
But I think Vader was thinking about that. He's like, no, my son called me a Jedi. My son still respects me. My son really believes in my ability to turn. He puts his life on the line for me. Like, I got to save his life and throw the Emperor down an elevator shaft.
Tears.
I have to do that. Tears. Right. So I think we typically do this. Listeners, Matthew and I have these kinds of conversations all the time, and they always find a way to come full circle. Yeah. So just as Simba,
this is the way that he and I we're just wired that way.
It just happens. We go from Lion King, the son kind of continuing the father's legacy. Yeah. From Luke continuing his father's legacy besides becoming a murderer. We're there
for another time.
So top five favorite films of all time that we've ever seen.
One more rundown.
Top five for me: District 9, Clerks, Count of Monte Cristo, Dark Knight, and Beverly Hills Cop. Movie Matt, top five: Lion King, Schindler's List, Return of the King, Forrest Gump, and the original Star Wars trilogy from 1977, Star Wars 1980, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi in 1983. Mm-hmm. Any final thoughts for the people, Matthew, before we sign off?
Well, I guess we'll hopefully see you at the movies. We'll see you at the movies. I thought you were gonna say "May the Force be with you." It's fine. No, that's too
easy.
As you always so eloquently say, it'd be too on the nose.
Too on the nose.
Which should be a recurring line in this podcast, I think.
Well, we all made it to the end. Thanks, listeners. This is Movie Matt and JMKing signing off. Be Bye-bye. Well. Thanks again for spending your time here at the JMKing podcast. Stay tuned and keep listening on your podcast platform of choice. I'm on nearly all of them. Don't forget to visit my website, jmkingpodcast.podbean.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, JMKing Vids Pods, and follow me on Twitter at JMKing Vids Pods. With that, this is Jonathan M. King, signing off.